Hello, listeners and viewers. So, typically at the beginning of a episode of the ARC Party, the first thing that you're going to hear or see or both is an author talking about their upcoming book that we're about to have a discussion for. And then the last thing that you hear at the end of an episode is that author responding to me, thanking for them coming on. I've always liked the idea that the first thing that you hear and the last thing that you hear are the author themselves, their voice, because, in my opinion, it's not about me. It's about the author and their book and the conversation that comes out of our episode. And so that's always been the goal. This is not a typical author interview episode, however. And so I thought I'd take an opportunity to remind you a little bit about how the podcast works and why we're all here. So this is an episode. This episode is one of two horror preview episodes that will be happening for the books that are coming out in 2025. In this episode, Becky Spratford and Emily Hughes join me to talk about all the books we're excited about between the months of January and June. And I say all, there's a lot more, but we each chose two, so you're going to get 36 different books discussed in this episode. Typically, these episodes draw a little bit more of a listenership or a viewership, and so I thought I'd take an opportunity to just remind you a little bit about the podcast. The reason we're here is so that I can have a conversation with an author, and you can get a spoiler-free conversation about their upcoming book and decide whether it sounds like something that you'd be interested in reading or not. Before the book comes out. So it helps you plan books that are coming out in the future by hearing the authors explain what's going on and what the story's about. As part of that, I also, in the post on my website for each episode, I will put a link to my bookshop.org affiliate page with a list of that author's books. It'll include the book that we're talking about, and then it'll include usually other books if other books are available as well. This helps all of us, because it helps you pre-order a book that you are now interested in. It helps the author get pre-orders, which is a crucial element to the success of a book. I cannot overstress, pre-orders are so helpful in the success of the launch of a book. And it helps authors have the ability to be published in the future, because if you have a weak launch of one book, publishing thinks, oh, this person isn't selling books, we don't want to publish their book. So pre-orders are super, super, super important. So you get to pre-order a book you're interested in. An author gets pre-orders, which is going to help them with the success of their launch. But it also is going to help me, the bookshop.org affiliate page. Every book that gets sold through there, a little bit of money comes back to me. I will say, sometimes authors have made an arrangement with a independent bookstore, typically, where they will do pre-orders of signed copies or special situations like that. Sometimes there's extra little swag involved. Sometimes they have a pre-order through the publisher where you can order it and get a thing like a sticker or whatever, that kind of thing. Anytime there is a special promotion like that, I will always push you toward that before I push you toward bookshop.org. My bookshop.org page exists to always give you a resource to find the book you just heard about, but I'm a fan like anybody else, so if there's a cool promotion, I'm always going to push people toward the cool promotion before the thing that I get to take money from. So that's a way that you can support yourself, the author, and my podcast. Another thing that you can do is on my website, you can pay a subscription fee on a monthly basis, and if you do that, you actually get bonus content there. So there is a thing that I'm starting to do, and it's building steam, and I want to do a lot more in 2025, called After Party. And so what After Party is, first of all, the normal ARC Party podcast is spoiler-free conversations about books that are about to be released. After Party takes that a little bit farther, so we finish our normal conversation, and then we keep it going, and we do all of the spoiler talk, but that doesn't go on the normal episode. That goes on my website, behind a paywall, so you have to try really hard to get the story spoiled for you. And usually it's going to be probably 15 minutes, 20 minutes or something, where we talk about the spoilers of the book, and we get into this stuff in the After Party that on the normal episode we say, oh man, I wish I could talk about spoilers because I want to say this. That's what the After Party is for. So that is another way that you can support the show. And then always, always, always leaving reviews and ratings is incredibly helpful as well. So Apple Podcasts is definitely more than half of where people listen to the podcast, but also Spotify and YouTube. Lots of people go to YouTube as well to check out the video versions of these podcasts. So subscribing, leaving a rating, leaving a review, YouTube, commenting. I always try to respond to every comment that comes through on YouTube and try and be as engaged as possible over there. So the more interaction, the more engagement I get from you through ratings, reviews, comments, and all that kind of stuff, sharing my stuff on social media, the more I'm going to get these awesome books and these bigger guests and give you more and more good content. So if you like what you're hearing, if you like what you're seeing, and you want to see more of that, and you believe in this podcast and want to see it be as successful as possible, please, do those things that I just recommended. If you like these authors and you want to see more of their books in the future, pre-order. Engage with your library to have your library order it. Share their stuff on social media. One of the things that I try to do anytime a book gets announced, I just share it. I put it on my Instagram story. You got a new story, you got a publisher's marketplace announcement, I always pop those into my Instagram story just in case someone hasn't seen that yet. Now they know about it. So that's the easiest way that you can support someone, by just like amplifying their voice. So please do what you can to support the authors that you believe in, because the more support they get from readers and their fellow authors, the more opportunities could open up for them in the future. All right, I have talked way too long. This episode is all about telling you what's coming up in the first half of 2025. So without further ado, we're diving right into it. We didn't do a big preamble because we wanted to get to all the good stuff. And so I am going to shut up and let that happen now. Thank you so much for your support, and I'm looking forward to all the incredible books that are coming in 2025. All right, we are back for the third time we're doing this now, which is our horror preview episode. I have my horror preview experts, so Becky Spratford is here and Emily Hughes. Thank you both for coming back yet again for another beautiful list of books.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, I'm excited to do this. It's been fun trying to jockey for position on who's going to talk about what books. Thanks to Emily's list also. So thanks for getting that up for everyone.
So for anybody who's new, we started doing this a year ago when we wanted to talk about going into 2024 and the books that the horror books that we were excited about. So we're back for our look at the first half of 2025. We've each chosen 2 books per month. So we've got 6 months, do the math, that's 36 books. And everybody's got busy lives. So we're just going to dive right into this because there is so much to talk about. And we're going to do our best to stick to the point and not get too effusive about the things that we want to talk about. And selfishly, I'm going to take the first spot. It's my podcast. Usually I would defer, but there's a book that's not horror and it's coming out in January. And so I figured I just want to do that one, and then we'll get into some of the more horror stuff. And this is a very selfish thing, but there's an author named Clevenger, and he wrote a book in 2002 called The Contortionist Handbook. And it is a fantastic book. It's been out of print for a while, and now it is coming back into print through Datura, which is an imprint of Angry Robot. And essentially, it is a story of a polydactyl man who is a expert forger, and he has these excruciating, like unbearable headaches, and the only way he can get rid of them is to just take as much drugs as possible, which usually causes him to overdose. And so he's in this position where like he's constantly overdosing to get away from this like horrible pain, but he doesn't want to get committed for like being suicidal or having mental illnesses and stuff. So he uses his abilities as a forger to basically create new identities to keep out of the system. And it's really just kind of an interesting, odd story about this guy who, it's like there's like a love story kind of basis to it, but he's also using his forging skills with like not the best people, and that catches up with him. So it's kind of a crime / just kind of gritty deal, but it's a fantastic book. Clevenger is one of the most proficient writers that I've ever read, And people like Chuck Palahniuk and Stephen Graham Jones rave about him. So if anybody wants to go back and listen to my conversation with Stephen Graham Jones, we talked about Demon Theory and how highly he praises like the actual like writing skill of Craig Clevenger. If you need an endorsement, I can't think of a better one. But it's an excellent book, and I'm happy to see that it's back for kind of a new generation of readers. So it is the one I'm probably most looking forward to in 2025.
Excellent. Well, my first pick of 2025 is a book that I read in an afternoon when I finally got my sweaty little hands on it, which is Wake Up and Open Your Eyes by McLeod Chapman. That's out January 7th from Quirk Books. Nothing Clay ever writes is gentle or easy to read, and this is certainly no exception. This is basically sort of an apocalypse novel about a, let's say, mental contagion or a possession of a sort that is transmitted through right-wing news, through wellness and influencer, content on social media, and through the sort of, the other sort of darker channels of the internet and our digital life. And it's told as kind of a travelogue where the protagonist drives down. He hasn't heard from his parents, who are right-leaning and live in Virginia, and he lives up in Brooklyn, and hasn't heard from them, and he's getting worried, and he gets to their house and he finds this unbelievably upsetting scene, and it just gets worse from there. But in typical Clay fashion, it is gnarly, it is confrontationally gross, it is upsetting and distressing, and it is like profound and moving and beautiful and fucked up. And that's the Clay McLeod Chapman guarantee.
And I'll tell you, I've read it. It blew me away. And it also, he manages to give it a perfect ending, which in these types of books, perfect for the story, which in these types of books, I'm always holding my breath, right? Is the author going to pull it off? So my book is another big, big book that's coming out in January. And it is Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix. And let me tell you, the first thing I'm going to tell you about this book is the second I finished this book, I texted Grady, and this is what I said. I said, "Damn you, Grady. I have given birth 2 times. How did you get it so right?" Wow. That is, exactly what I want to say about this book. This book is about teen pregnancy in the years just before Roe v. Wade is passed. And reading it now after the Dobbs decision is even more chilling. And it's about the homes for wayward girls. And what I love about the girls in this book is that they're all pregnant, but it's a range of ways and reasons that they got pregnant. And some of them got pregnant on purpose, right? It just empowers all these girls. But the story has the witchcraft as well. So we're in this oppressively hot Florida house where they are treated like crap. And everything about their bodies is kept from them. But they do go meet a librarian at the bookmobile who hands the main character a book, Witchcraft for it's a groovy witchcraft book, and they start to follow it to try to take some power back in their life. And what I'm going to tell you is, in Grady fashion, he pulls no punches. This is emotionally wrecking, but also the horror comes from places that you might not expect it to come from. And the people in it, the witch trope is not what you expect from the witch trope as well. And here's the thing I'm most excited about. I'm super excited about dudes reading this book and going, "Grady, this book is gross." And guess what? All the gross body horror, 100% true. Can't wait for that. Especially as a woman who gave birth twice.
Wow. That reminds me of, so I was listening to the Talking Scared State of the Horror, whatever it's called, that Emily, you were on. And he had mentioned his kind of how naive he was about So Thirsty and women in their 30s worrying about looking, like their looks, not being what they used to be.
Right, and all 3 of us just started laughing at him. With
just
love.
immediate laughter. And so that, yeah. I mean, but he was genuine. He genuinely had not considered that. And it was just like, an experience that he didn't have. But at the same time, it's like, oh, men. So I will say one thing about Wake Up and Open Your Eyes. I did read that as well. I share all of your thoughts about that. And for anybody who's listening, I will be talking to Clay in about a week and a half. So there will be an episode about that book coming up very soon. And hopefully we'll actually talk about it. Last time I had Clay on, 2 hours before we even started talking about the story. So we'll see how that goes. My second book for January is Metamorphosis by Ross Jeffrey. And I'm pretty sure this is either a reissue or it had some incarnation that it was in before. I'm not sure if this is 100% new because I'm pretty sure like an ebook already exists for sale, but it's coming out in January. It's a little bit unclear for me. Ross is just one of those people who I've been aware of, but just have not gotten to read any of his stuff yet. So one of the things that I always try to challenge myself with is find new voices to hear. And so this book, Metamorphosis, is a haunting exploration of grief, obsession, and transformation. Grief I'm getting a lot of recently in the books that I'm reading. Mm-hmm. Cynthia, a woman who once thrived in her autonomy, now finds herself ensnared by a relentless desire to reclaim what she has lost. Living a double life, she meticulously plans a path that blurs the lines between love and madness. Armed with a mask that reflects her inner turmoil, Cynthia descends into a world where reality and fantasy intertwine, revealing the dark depths of her psyche. So, again, want to get into some Ross Jeffrey business, and this sounds pretty interesting. So, that's my other pick for January.
My second for January is Our Winter Monster by Dennis Mahoney. This is out January 28th from Hell's 100. I've read this one too, and it's fun. It's one of those books that's a fun romp. And there's, a lot of nasty, gnarly stuff that happens in it, but it's still fun. It's about a couple who are going through a rough time in their relationship, who decide to try to salvage things by taking, a winter weekend upstate, going somewhere romantic, and they don't even make it to their, B&B before they're run off the road by a storm and separated. And and the whole thing unfolds over the course of a night. And they keep trying to find each other, and they keep just having these near misses, and there's something following them around in the storm, and it's big, and it can rip people's arms clean off their bodies. And also in the mix here is the sheriff of this small town, who is still kind of reeling from the disappearance of another couple about 2 months before in the town that has remained unsolved. They have no idea what happened to these other two. And in a relatively, it's brief and it's kind of pacey. And even in that, like, the book moves, but you still get a great sense of like this town and these characters and the little, network they have. And there's this great thread of mystery kind of running throughout the whole book that I don't want to spoil, because it's a good sort of like late in the book pivot. But yeah, I had a great time with this.
It's always fun when you can have a great time with the horror book. Mine is also one I've read already, and actually my review has already been posted in Library Journal. It is At Dark, I Become Loathsome by LaRocca. First of all, bringing it back to Clay, I actually comped this one to What Kind of Mother. It is really intense grief horror, but in similar sort of way. And I would say that I think this is his most complete and accessible book. So basically, it's that unbearable anguish of grief. So we meet our main character, Ashley, and he is someone who has a job performing fake death rituals. It's a job he sort of created for himself. For people who desperately want to rekindle their will to live, they hire him. This is the setup. I'm not giving anything away, to bury them alive for 30 minutes. And then he unburies them, and he has a whole way he does it so that they don't die. He brings others to the brink of death and then back again, but it helps him to ease his own pain because he is in a perpetual state of grief due to the death of his beloved wife from cancer and the unsolved, then like after that, the unsolved kidnapping of his young son, both of whose ghosts continue to haunt him in the book. So it all is predicated around, we meet some of these clients. It's predicated on a new client, Jinx, who both intrigues and titillates Ashley with a grotesque tale, which I saw as like a bonus Eric LaRocca story within this work, which I really liked. And he cannot stop thinking about Jinx and his work, and it's making him question everything. And he makes choices that are, horrific. But he does repeat the novel's title over and over again, At Dark I Become Loathsome, as a refrain, and it really echoes in the reader's mind. And it's both deeply unsettling yet somehow soothing, which I think also describes the story. And I was really impressed by this book. So that is my pick.
Cool. I will say really quickly about At Dark I Become Loathsome, because you kind of mentioned the story within a story. There are stories that people tell to each other within that book that like kind of feel like, yeah, they could be their own thing, but they, it's in the service of like kind of creating depth to the characters and everything. Yeah.
February, here we come.
All right, my first pick for February is The Pink Agave Motel by V. Castro, and this is going to be kind of a beginning for I think, a theme for me for the year, which is leaning more into short story collections. I recently met V. Castro for the first time at the Scares That Care Author Con in St. Louis, and she was delightful and just so energetic, and I had not had a chance to read anything by her yet, but I was excited to, again, break into someone new. And so this is a collection of short stories. The kind of the titular one seems like it's like a person who runs a hotel, and there's a murder that happens at the hotel, and it becomes kind of like a mystery of like solving who killed this person. But like there's a lot of kind of weird sounding things that go on. So let's see, in the description it says, further within these tales, discover a woman who is a fish out of water drinking at a seaside honky-tonk, the trapped guests who undergo sexual liberation, and aliens who find the sexiest of disguises. So it seems like it kind of goes into weird and interesting places. And I like the idea. I think that's something that's missing from my reading in general, is kind of like an unapologetic sexuality. And I feel like that's kind of something that from what I know of V. Castro does very well. And so after all this grief horror, maybe things in a different direction a little bit, hopefully. So again, V. Castro, another one I'm looking forward to just like getting a start with, adding more people into my reading catalog.
Well, first up for me for February is Junie by Aaron Crosby Eckstein. Have not read this one yet, but if had my eye on it for a minute. This is a historical horror set just before the Civil War. It's about an enslaved 16-year-old girl on a plantation in Alabama. She is kind of her role is to help the master's daughter. And she's in mourning for her older sister. And so when the master's daughter is about to be married off, she does something desperate and rouses her sister's ghost from the grave. And together they kind of delve into the dark history of the plantation. I think that the thing that is kind of interesting to me about this is there are certain things that are so horrifying that even horror novels, horror movies are sort of hesitant to touch them. But I think, in the right hands and with the right approach, they can be, some of the most compelling stories that we get. Think about a movie like The Zone of Interest, right? So I'm interested to see what this turns out to be. And Eckstein is a new author to me, so I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome.
That does sound awesome. So my first book for February is a book that's going to be in my January Library Journal column. So I've already read it. And interestingly, behind the scenes look, it's a book that Emily told me about. Like, did you read this yet? And I said, I'm reading it right after I saw her in person this past fall. So it is Listen to Your Sister by Neena. I believe the last name is pronounced Viel. So this is such an original story. And it's also terrifying. So we have 3 siblings. They're all Black. Calla, 25, is the big sister. Dre, 23, is the next one. And Jamie is 16. So the family has lived through significant trauma. Calla, though, is called upon and really unprepared for this a few years before the story starts to be the main caregiver to Jamie. Dre is a chef. He's not able to do it. Calla is a marketing professional with her career on the rise. She's trying to date and settle down. And Jamie is difficult, but he has lived through a lot of trauma as the baby. Their dad was a drug dealer. Their mom is unavailable. Their dad was murdered. Their mom is unavailable and really actually kind of nasty. So the story begins, and what I love is it's all three of their points of view, so you really understand what's going on. But the crux of the story is that Calla is plagued by vivid and horrific and frequent nightmares. And they're all about the family being in peril. And so all I'm going to say is that there's stuff that goes on that's fascinating about the family, but the siblings all get separated and then trapped in Calla's nightmare. And they have to fight for their lives to bring the family back together. It was very unique. It was very compelling. It's an impressive debut. I thought it was real characters with relatable situations. It was terrifying, and it was immersive supernatural horror, but it was clearly all underpinned by love, and I really liked it. I was comping it to something like A Light Most Hateful by Haley Piper, but also I thought it had some serious dark matter, Blake Crouch vibes. Then I think that will draw in a wider pool of new readers.
Yeah, I'm really glad you clicked with this one, Becky. I keep thinking about it. And there's some real verve to the writing too. There's a lot of humor. There's a lot of kind of sharp repartee. Yeah, great book.
And each character, the 3 points of view is so unique. And I kept waiting for the other ones to come back. They were just so authentic. All three voices. I loved all of them, even when they made terrible choices.
Right. I liked spending time with them. And also they all did infuriating and stupid things. But
infuriating.
But I liked them, so I cared. That's what you want.
Yes. Yes. Great. A great debut. Totally put it on your radar, everybody.
Awesome. Okay, my second February pick is, again, technically not horror, but I think it gets a pass because it's Sarah Gran. And for anybody who's aware of Sarah Gran, she wrote the only book you really need to read about demonic possession or I know that sounds weird to say because you should read as many as you want to, but the definitive, I've never read anything that reaches the quality of Come Closer. And so I was completely sold on Sarah Gran just from that. Her book, the Book of the Most Precious Substance, I don't know if either of you read that, is fantastic. And everything Sarah read, that's the two that I've read, but just blowing my mind with the quality of writing and the creativity of the stories. So she has a short story collection coming out called Little Mysteries. And it looks like it's short. It's a collection of short stories that have to do with mysteries. It is more of a mystery suspense kind of situation. And some, or at least one of the stories includes her Claire DeWitt character, which is a series of books that are more mystery focused. But I'm just going to say the reason I chose this is because if Sarah Gran wrote, anything, A Note to Her Landlord, I would read it. And so I don't need any more explanation than that. And I have wanted to check out her more non-horror stuff, or mystery stuff and things like that. And so why not start here?
All right. My second one for February is Beauty and the Blood by Charlotte Carter. Now, I've never read Charlotte Carter, but she is a beloved and successful author of a couple of beloved mystery series, the Nanette Hayes series, and I think the Cook County mystery series, and those are Jazz Age Chicago mysteries, if I'm remembering correctly.
Ooh.
And she's also I think she's in her late 70s. She has been around for a while. She's been writing for a while. And this is a standalone horror novel about a mysterious curse. And so, as someone who used to write marketing copy for book publishing for a living, there's sometimes I can look at marketing copy for a book and go, oh, you had no idea how to get your arms around this plot in like 2 paragraphs, which is no knock on the marketer. Like some books are just indescribable, right?
Yeah.
And this seems to be one of those. If I tried to just again, I haven't read it, so if I tried to just go by the marketing copy, I would be like, okay, and then there's just this other character shows up. Suffice it to say, it seems to focus on 2 Black women, a lawyer and a chef, and a curse that has spanned generations and is, affecting their lives somehow. So I'm just always, I'm always interested to see what authors who've been around for a while and decide to kind of take a step over into horror. I'm always interested to see what they bring to the table, because I think that's so interesting when people bring other genre conventions and other styles and other just backgrounds and bases of knowledge to bear on horror. Just as a side note to publishers, guys, you really don't have to publish all of your Black horror books in February. Guys, come on. There's 11 other months.
I know. Yeah. Ugh. Well, I have one that isn't a Black horror book for my second book in February. And it might be my biggest surprise of this chunk of books we're talking about. And it is The Poorly Made and Other Things by Sam Rebelein. So, Becky, why would you be surprised? Edenville was great. Yes, Edenville was very good, and it was a very good debut. But here's the thing. I wish the publishing industry, publishers, I'm going to talk to them too, Emily. I wish they would let authors put out short story books before a novel. Because before he published the critically acclaimed and award-winning Edenville, set in Renfield County, he wrote a series of short stories framed around the place. Here's the thing. I've read both. Those stories not only elevate the novel, but now they make me want to read everything the man ever writes for the rest of the world. Like, wow. I liked Edenville. I love it now because I read these stories. Here's what he does with this book. First of all, it begins with an email from a manic woman, Rachel, to her brother, Tom, explaining that she's been researching the notorious history of their hometown and has found that the land itself may be responsible for numerous deaths, innumerable deaths over the decades, including their own mothers. And so I'm going to tell you, that was the first thing. Then you get a story. And the story is somehow having to do with Renfield County, right? Somehow has to do with the place. And the stories get more and more menacing. All of them are menacing. All of them are nearly perfect stories. And I am very, very strict about these. But what's so great about this collection is in between each story, the emails keep coming. So the first one is literally said as sent 8 hours ago, down to 26 minutes ago. So in between each story, there's another frantic email. And those stories, like I said, in between are steeped in madness, evil, violence, and they feature other characters. And taking on their own, they're great. But the very last story features her brother, Tom. And so that's all I'm going to tell you. It's just stellar. It is for people who like things like Mallerman's Goblin, but also anyone who appreciates illicitly alluring and biting short stories that smack them over the head. And I was thinking of people like Cass Caw and Sarah Reed. So this is Poorly Made and Other Things. And get ready to read this book.
I can't wait for this one. I loved Edenville, and I'm a sucker for two things. I'm a sucker for an invented, shared universe for an author's, work. And I'm also a sucker for a set of linked short stories that are all set in the same environment. One of my favorite things I read this past year was Andrew Michael Hurley's Barrowbeck, which hasn't been published in the US, which that's a whole other topic of me agonizing. But yeah, that's a trope I love, and I love Sam's work, so I'm hyped for this one.
It's fantastic. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, I had heard about Edenville and heard podcasts where he talked about it and everybody raving about it, and it was just one I could not get around to. And so when I heard about this, I was like, there's no way that I'm missing this. This is the one. I'm going to prioritize this. So yeah, very excited about that. You guys want to get into March?
Let's go for it.
We're going to march into March. That's horrible. I'm going to take I get the. I know. I get the. I get the Stephen Graham Jones this time around, and that was very graciously handed to me by Becky. Before I go into talking about this book, have you guys read it?
I have.
I have not read it yet either. So you could probably, Becky, when I'm done ham-handedly explaining what this book is about, maybe give a little bit of your flavor to it. But I will start by saying that, to my recollection, the last time I read Vampires by Stephen Graham Jones was his short called The Night Cyclist, which came out probably in 2013 or something like that.
I love that story. I love that story.
It is so good. It is so good. But to my knowledge, I don't think he touches on that very much at all. And that's the only example I can even think of. So hearing that Jones wrote a book with a vampire in it got me excited. Hearing that it's a historical horror book got me excited. And so The Buffalo Hunter comes out in March. And it's basically, and the other thing I liked about it is it's like a diary.
Yeah.
So it's like it's a priest telling the story of a vampire who is looking for justice. Kind of is kind of the general explanation. And I'll just read a little bit from the description I pulled just to give a little bit, to flesh it out a little bit. But a diary written in 1912 by a Lutheran pastor is discovered within a wall. What it unveils is a slow massacre, a chain of events that go back to 217 Blackfeet dead in the snow. Told in transcribed interviews by a Blackfeet native, Goodstab, who shared the narrative of his peculiar life over a series of confessional visits. This is an American Indian revenge story written by one of the new masters of horror, Stephen Graham Jones. It sounds awesome. Everybody I know that has had the opportunity to read it. Okay, this happens with every Stephen Graham Jones. He comes out with a book and everybody's like, I can't believe, holy crap. But like, for some reason, this reaction seems different. Like there's something about this book that is taking a step that he hasn't taken before or something. The reactions I'm getting seem more so, kind of in a way. And so, yeah, very excited to see. I've had a copy for a while, and I just have not had an opportunity to get into it yet. But this is definitely one that's like, yeah, hugely excited for.
This book is amazing. I actually think the book it is most like is actually James by Percival Everett.
Oh,
And
wow.
that is what I'm gonna say. This is a retelling of the story of Western expansion, of like the taking over of the land. There's also a current day storyline that starts and ends the book, and it makes the story come together.
Wow.
Again, literally the best thing about Stephen Graham Jones is every detail matters.
Yeah.
And so when you read the book, you know things are going to come back, but he doesn't make you feel stupid if you forget. So I just want, like, it's so, the ending will make you just curl up in a ball and cry. But also Goodstab is a great character. This is a revenge novel. This is a history novel. My review's coming out soon in Booklist, but I started with a quote from the book, which is, "What I am is the Indian who cannot die. I'm the worst dream America ever had." And I think that sums up a lot of the book. And I'm going to leave it at that. So I do think James and Louise Erdrich are very good read-alikes for this.
Oh.
I'm feeling very salty
Wow.
because I have requested a galley several times and none has been forthcoming. But that's not your problem.
So I will clarify. I have a digital arc. I do not have
a digital arc as well.
Like a print. Yeah, I do not have a print. And I was surprised as anybody when it showed up. I was like, oh, I guess this is my lucky day. I will say, since we're on the topic of Stephen Graham Jones, before we move off of it, it is another heavy year of Stephen Graham Jones releases, as me and Becky were talking about before we started our conversation. So the reissue of Mapping the Interior from Tor is coming out. There is that double book where it's the babysitter
And
lives and flips Killer on the Road. Thank you for remembering the title. But then also there is a slew of reissues coming out from Open Road Media again, just like there was in 2024. So we're looking at another Stephen Graham Jones heavy year.
Oh no.
I'm
But I
happy.
think
I'm happy for libraries because many of his books were out of print, and as he got
yes,
popular, libraries could not add them, and
right,
so and readers are asking for them, and it's very hard. It's the same thing that happens when like a movie's only on Netflix and they ask us why we don't have a DVD. Like
right,
we want
right.
to have the books they want to read, so
Yeah.
I'm very happy for that. For that.
Yeah, I think it's a great just to have them in. First of all, I think it's great that Steven, who probably didn't get the best of contracts when he was doing a lot of indie publishing, regained those rights and has more of an opportunity to give himself a good deal with reissuing his stuff. I think for everybody who's newer to him and is gotten past the kind of stuff that everybody's read recently, they now have so much more to explore. And so, yeah, very excited about all those reissues, especially, and I'm going to cut this out because I don't think I can say it yet, but
All right, back to work. Emily.
um,
So my first one for March is Wrecked. That's Rekt by Alex Gonzalez. This comes out from Erewhon on March 25th. And the other night on Clay's Fearmongers show, he and Neil and I were talking about this sort of like mini trend of forthcoming mini trend, starting with Wake Up and Open Your Eyes. And there are a couple other books coming out next year, and this is one of them. And they are it's male authors grappling with young men being radicalized on the internet, basically. And turning that into fodder for horror fiction, which it's, pretty ripe for the picking. This is a book about a young man who falls into, the depths of despair after his girlfriend dies in a car accident. And he ends up in, darker and darker corners of the internet. And he kind of sinks into this mysterious and like deeply toxic web forum, watching videos of people dying. And this just becomes something that consumes his life. And he tries to, get to the bottom of what's going on behind this website, behind, who is the person who runs it? What is this, mysterious outlet? But I just watched a movie that came out this year called Red Rooms, which is a French Canadian horror movie. Well, it's a horror movie, psychological thriller, about a woman who becomes obsessed with a serial killer, and she attends his trial, and she, dresses up as one of his victims, and he's on trial in part for airing the deaths of his victims on the dark web. So this seems to be something, it's one of those moments where horror seems to be grappling with, something that's in the cultural consciousness. So I'm very interested to see where we go with that. And also Paul Tremblay has been talking this book up left, right, and center. And if there's one thing I'm going to do, it's going to be to take that recommendation.
Good choice.
Yeah. Yep.
So my first book is the next book by Cynthia Pelayo, Vanishing Daughters, which comes out again. We're doing March, and this is another one of her stories that's like a horror thriller hybrid that is set in Chicago. And in this case, it follows a journalist, which I thought, and I haven't read this one yet. I'm about to read it, but I find interesting because Cynthia herself was a journalist early in her career. So she's a journalist. Her mother died in their old mansion on Chicago's South Side. And she starts to have nightmares of a woman in white pleading to come home. There's music that's switched on in locked rooms. It's just terrifying. It's closing in. But she has convinced herself that these stirrings and these signs that something is talking to her, this otherworldly, ghostly things, are more just, her brain. Like she's just in grief. But then she starts researching a serial killer who's claimed the lives of 51 women in Chicago, which to me harkens back to some of the other work that she has done dealing with deaths of women. So I thought that was interesting. So Bree starts researching the murders, and she meets a stranger who tells her that there are more sleepless nights than bad dreams, and that they hold the key to putting all the ghosts to rest and stopping the killer. But the killer's closing in, and so she may end up dead herself. So it's a really, really much more leaning more on the thriller than she has before, but with the supernatural. And then the theme of Sleeping Beauty is in this story as well, because she always likes to look to fairy tales. So I'm excited about this one. It's coming in early March.
Very good. Yeah. So my second book for March is a book called The Memory Ward by John Bassoff. And John Bassoff I've known for quite a while, back when he was being published on Dark Fuse. This is a book called Corrosion that came out in the early 2010s. It's fantastic. He wrote a book that came out on Eraserhead Press called Crematorium, which was pretty fantastic. And so he's got roots in crime-ish horror or horror-ish crime. Lately, he's been publishing stuff that's more straight mystery thriller. But this book sounds freaking awesome. And so I had to, I set up we're going to do an episode about this book. So I decided I'd switch up my March to include this. So I'm just going to read the description of the book. They say it's always beautiful in Bethlehem, Nevada. No place you'd rather live. The people are friendly, if a little nosy, and there's no crime to speak of. Life is pretty perfect. But postal worker Hank Davies has started to suspect something is off in this idyllic town. And he's certain of that when he realizes the letters he's been delivering are just blank pages. Hank isn't the only one who notices the oddities in Bethlehem. I said that wrong. One such person knocks on his window in the middle of the night, urging him to investigate his bedroom wall. When Hank pulls back the wallpaper, he discovers dozens of sheets of paper full of a story that is either complete madness or unbelievable truth. As he begins looking beyond the veneer of his smiling neighbors and their white picket fences, Hank is drawn further and further into a disturbing new reality. That sounds pretty cool. And on the strength of the stuff that I've read by John Bassoff before, I'm very excited to get into this book. And it's coming out from Blackstone. Blackstone is what Eric LaRocca's book.
Yes.
Yeah. So Eric, so I'm seeing more and more from Blackstone lately. And so, yeah, that's exciting too. Like I like a publisher who's starting to take an interest and put more effort behind horror books. So yeah, interested in that one. The cover's really nice. Yeah.
So my second for March is The Unworthy by Agustina Bastarrica.
I love this book.
This is the new novel from you know it, of course, Tender is the Flesh, her blockbuster, sort of one of those books where if you had given me 1,000 guesses as to what would have gone viral on TikTok, it would have been my 999th, right? But sometimes it just happens to the right book, the right author, and this also has a hook that is absolute catnip to me. I love a nun story. I love a convent, cloister story. I especially love it set against a, mysterious ecological worldwide collapse outside the walls of the highly secretive and violent religious order. Yeah, I mean, she could, again, this is another author, she could write absolutely anything, and I would be like, yeah, sure, send me 12 copies.
I will tell you, I have read it, and what is so good about this book is how it is written, how this nun she's unnamed, how she is finding the time and the materials with which to write are talked about in the book, which was fascinating to me. It made the story even better. It was great. It was, yeah. You're all gonna love it. Just go buy it. My book is actually, I paired this on purpose for my March books. It's another supernatural thriller. This is the new book by Erica T. Worth called The Haunting of Room 904. This one I have read and already have a review ready to go. So Olivia is the most sought after paranormal investigator in Denver, but her successful business is rooted in deep personal trauma. Her sister, Naiche, committed suicide in room 904 of the Brown Hotel almost exactly 5 years ago. But I need to tell you something important about her sister. Her sister was always able to see the dead. And Olivia didn't always believe her. But when her sister died, Olivia got that power. And in those 5 years, she has become like a really serious and successful paranormal investigator. So throughout the book, you're meeting her clients and you're seeing how she does her business, which is fascinating. So the hotel contacts Olivia to prove that Naiche's death is part of a cycle of violence that goes back generations and repeats exactly every 5 years. And so Olivia and her partner, who's also her best friend who lives with her, agrees to take on this time-sensitive case. However, it is way more dangerous than Olivia realizes, as there are multiple forces at work, and they're all connected to a massacre of Native women and children in 1864. And they have picked her throughout time. Like, this is not an accident that she is the one working on this. And they're going to stop at nothing to get what they want, even if it destroys Olivia and everyone she holds dear. What I really like about the story, I've held back a lot of details, but I think that what readers will like is they eagerly follow Olivia's investigation and they get to know her diverse and endearing friends. I want to see another mystery with these people. Like, they were fun to spend time with. The story itself is harrowing. It has twists and turns. It winds its way through past atrocities right up to the present and has a lot of open and honest conversation about, especially knowing Erica's background. This character, Olivia, is she Hispanic? Is she Native? Does it matter? Like, why do we have to prove this? And in fact, I actually think it's very similar to people who like Cynthia Pelayo's books. The massacre itself, I went and she has resources. I went and looked it up on the website about it to learn about it. We do go back and forth in time. What I do want to say to people is this is completely different than White Horse. And I just think they need to be prepared for that. This is much more a supernatural investigative mystery. It is just as good, the writing, but it is a totally different type of story. So I am concerned that people are going to come into it and be like, this isn't White Horse. And it isn't. But I'm not kidding. Like, I want to read more with these characters. I want to see what Olivia does next. And hopefully it's not putting her in so much danger. But of course it will be, because that's how mysteries go.
All right, I'm going to start out April with The Sundowner's Dance by Todd Kiesling. Todd, I read only recently, just read the first book I read of his was that Cold, Black, and Infinite collection of short stories, which was fantastic. And in the conversation with him, it, kind of realizing that his overall goal is to create his own kind of universe of Appalachian horror. And so that really locked me in because I liked the stuff I read in that short story collection. But man, the pitch for this book is so quick and so just grabbing. In The Sundowner's Dance, an elderly widower relocates to a retirement community and discovers his new neighbors are worshiping a meteorite. That's the whole thing. And it says it's pitched as Cocoon meets the color out of space. Grief, odd neighbors, cosmic horror. And so cosmic horror I know is kind of like an overarching thing for Todd. And now that I know that the stuff that he writes is kind of intentionally, at least somewhat connected to the other stuff, there's an extra curiosity for me to see how does this retirement home horror tie in with a town that's got a bunch of mannequins that are moving around. So I'm so fascinated to see how this universe kind of fills out and builds and connects to other stuff. And he's just a great writer. So really excited for another Todd Kiesling book.
All right. My first for April is Freak's Law by Jane Flett. This is from Zando and it's coming April 1st. It's a carnival horror book. I'm sold. That is all I needed to be sold on this book. Catherine Dunn, Geek Love, one of the great novels of our time. And the marketing copy comps it as well to Angela Carter's Night at the Circus. I'm like, I was already seated. I already had my butt in the chair. Just keep talking, right? So this is set in Scotland in the late 90s. And it's the story of a traveling carnival, populated by freaks, by people with, disabilities and bodily differences, and just any kind of non-conforming, lifestyles or presentations. There are contortionists and fortune tellers, and a werewolf, a fat lady, illusionists, conjoined twins. And they get to the town, and they kind of start their act, and they start to draw attention from the very repressed and conservative town folk. And it turns out that what they're actually there for is revenge for having been, cast out in the first place. And I'm very, I don't know, this one I'm kind of bouncing up and down for. It also has a killer cover. It's just gorgeous, and it really pops.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you guys know the canceled HBO series Carnival?
Mm-hmm.
Because
I
that
never
is
watched it, yeah.
I find my spirit animals in people who like that show. I'm still so sad it's not on the air. So I actually looked this book up when you put it on the spreadsheet, and I was like, oh my gosh, I want to know more about this book. I'm so excited.
I have a galley.
Yeah, totally
my
sold.
big winter project is going to be getting through my stack of 2025 galleys. We'll see how it goes.
Ugh, mine is an ongoing process.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Yep.
My book is one that I have already read and absolutely love. It is When the Wolf Comes Home by Nat Cassidy, and I will get a star in the January issue of Library Journal, where I also did a really fun interview with Nat, which I had a lot of fun doing. So I was really excited about that. But here's the thing about this book. I read this book and I loved it when I read it, and I was like, am I going to give it a star or not? And then I went back, I couldn't stop thinking about it, and I went back and read the ending, and I was like, this is so good. So I'll give you the setup, but you need to understand that this is more than what I'm going to tell you. It is a werewolf novel, but it is totally different than any werewolf novel you have ever read. So after a particularly bad day at work, at a 24-hour LA diner, aging aspiring actress Jess finds a young boy whimpering outside of her apartment complex and brings him inside. But this is no ordinary boy, and the father who is looking for him is a monster who will stop at nothing to get him back. And that is the opening. And I didn't even leave out another major thing that happens, which I'm going to leave out in the first 10 pages. And I think it's his best to date. And I think that's saying a lot, talking about viral, right? He's a viral sensation as well. He consciously frames this as a story about daddy issues, but it's also an homage to classic pulp horror novels and classic chase novels with a clear Twilight Zone influence. When you find out what's going on with the boy and the dad, I mentioned it to someone, they're like, oh, that's like a Twilight Zone episode. But this just scratches the surface. This has action, adventure, blood, twists. The tale, though, is anchored by this evolving relationship between Jess and the boy she calls the kiddo, who are running away from the dad chasing them. They are the beating heart at the terrifying center of this book. But I want to warn people, the back of my arc said no one will be spared, and no one will be spared. You have to be ready. And the horrors here are going to burrow much deeper into you, forcing a confrontation with the power field fear holds over all of us. The reveal, and then the reveal of what's going on is pretty early, but how it's used and what it morphs into is what makes this book existentially terrifying.
I can't wait to read this. I think he's one of the best writers currently working, specifically in how he captures the feel of vintage, the greats of vintage horror fiction. There's a lot of Peter Straub in there. There's a lot of Stephen King in there. There's a lot of Thomas Tryon even in there. But it's fresh, and it's clear-eyed, and it's very purposeful about what it's doing. I Rest Stop was one of my favorite things I read this year. I was like, this is such a little book, and it is firing on all cylinders.
I think it was when I talked to him about Rest Stop, but it might have been Nestlings. I don't remember, but we basically ended off knowing that when this book comes out, we would be having a really crazy conversation about fathers.
Yes.
Because when everything I've read by this guy, there's like these deeper personal issue things that get explored or just like aired out or whatever you want to call it. And so we had touched on father things in the past in the conversations I've had with him. And he's like, oh, just wait until you get to this book. And so, and I like the fact that like the book starts out with kind of a cheeky thing where it says all fathers are motherfuckers.
Yes. I posted a picture of that on Instagram the other day. I was like, this is terrific.
Yeah, and Jess has obviously daddy issues as well. And she's coming to terms with her dad and her relationship with him after his recent death, too, when the novel opens.
Yep.
It's great. Very
excited to dive into that and to spend a lot of time talking to Nat about how awful fathers can be. My next one for April is Senseless by Ronald Malfi. And Ronald Malfi, I have come to lately. I read They Lurk, and which is a collection of novellas, I guess. And the thing that really hooked me on him was that he writes, it's obviously horror, and it should be categorized as horror, but there's a real kind of like detective-y angle to a lot of the stuff that he writes. And I liked that approach as being different than, your straight up like haunted house or like monster thing. There's, like a lot of the stuff that I got out of that collection, They Lurk, was normal life tainted by horrible, unexplainable, maybe supernatural things. And so from what I know of Senseless, which I have not read, basically there's like a death in the desert. And so people are investigating it, and it's multiple plots that kind of like weave together. But it's like, is it a serial killer? Is it a person of unexplainable origin or whatever? And so I'm finding that I really like that kind of blend of crime and horror and how the supernatural can push what would be a normal investigation into something completely different. And it seems like Ronald Malfi is like just cornering that kind of aspect of horror. And it's so good. And so, yeah, very excited. He's one of those people that went from, man, I got to read that guy one day to like, man, I got to read that guy all the time.
My second book for April is The Cut by C.J. Dotson.
I'm about to read this one. I can't wait.
Wonderful. I know virtually nothing about this. I am just so taken by the cover and the hook. It's about a woman who is fleeing an abusive relationship, and she has a toddler, and she's also pregnant. And she finds a job as a hotel housekeeper at this kind of like slightly seedy hotel on like the coast of one of the Great Lakes. And it comes with a free room. Okay, great. She's got food, she's got a roof over her head, and she's got a job. Except that means that she's in the hotel all the time. And so she's the one who starts to notice when weird things start happening, and when, there are things slithering in the bathtub and squelching down the halls, and guests are going missing, and something weird is happening in the pool. And it seems like such a great hook that I'm absolutely here for it.
Has a great cover too. All right, my turn is a book that will surprise no one. It's Chuck Wendig's next chunky horror novel. It's at 400 pages, The Staircase in the Woods. So this is what we come to expect from Chuck's excellent, epic horror novels. We have 5 high school friends. They have an oath. They're going to protect each other no matter what. Then on a camping trip in the middle of forest, they find something that is a mysterious staircase to nowhere. And of course, as you can expect, one friend walks up it and never comes back down, and the staircase disappears. And just like the classic Peter Straub, Stephen King stories like this, we come back 20 years later, the staircase has reappeared, and now they go to look for the lost boy and to see what lies beyond this staircase in the woods. I am really excited about this. I'm always, his books never work for my review schedule especially when they came out in the fall, just because the way it fell. So I was super excited to find out this one came out in April. And I wrote my editor and I was like, I'm totally want to do this. We had a due date. And then she's like, oh, somebody else already turned in a review for it. And I was like, no. So I'm going to have to find time to read this on my own. But I'm very excited because he just always takes, that's the setup, right? It sounds like stories we've read before, but he always does something different, and they're always super creepy.
Well, I'm really interested to see
Becky, have you read
what
it?
happens. Well, because the core concept of this, the staircase in the woods, comes from an old creepypasta, series of stories about a search and rescue officer who kept finding these, incongruous staircases in the woods. So I'm very interested to read this and see if there's a tie-in in there.
I'm sure there is. He usually gets his ideas from real things.
So Becky, you have not read this yet?
No, have you?
I'm the only one who's read this. Wow. I am going to tell you, I don't know how he pulled off what he pulled off. Because yes, that promise on its own, the staircase and the person going missing and everything, it's wow, this is a promise, and he delivers on that promise, but he blows it out so big. Because I think when I posted that I had finished reading it, I said something like, how did he manage to do everything? He did everything, and he did it so fucking well. Of all the books I've read this year, that one was the one that surprised me the most. And I've always been I've been a Wendig fan, this right here. I've been a Wendig guy for a long time, and I've always thought he's a skilled writer. And this does something where I was constantly what? And it's so, I haven't been this excited about a Wendig book in a while.
Well,
so
that's
very
great.
excited for
I'm
both
excited.
of you to read that.
And now I'm more mad that I didn't get to read it.
I know.
I was so early. I asked months ago.
You gotta find time for it, because it is a very rewarding read. Absolutely. I think that moves us into May. Does that move us into May?
Yes, it does.
Okay. I'm going to start off May talking about a book. So I'm going to talk about Maxine, which is Tim Waggoner's novelization of the film Maxine by Ty West. Tim Waggoner has done already X and Pearl. For anybody who's watching, you can see X and Pearl on my shelf here. He's done the novelization of those books. He novelized the whole trilogy, and I was very in love with those movies, and so I was excited to see someone with such an insane resume tackle these books. And so I've read X so far. I've not gotten into Pearl yet, but he manages to do what a novelization should do and give you a little bit more perspective that you can't see in a film, or flesh out an idea that makes it make more sense. I've always been fascinated with novelizations in general, because it's an interesting idea for a story to go from screen to page. And a great example of a novelization that I thought was fantastic and really kind of fleshed out a book was when Brian Evanson novelized The Lords of Salem by Rob Zombie. Incredible. Well, and it's Brian Evanson, so of course. But so far, Tim has taken a movie that I really enjoyed and given it a little bit more dimension. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how the rest of the trilogy fills out. And I should be talking to him about the trilogy in general sometime this coming year, but A24 is really weird. This is the only weird thing about this. There's no release date for Maxine yet, even though it's early 2025. And when both of these other novelizations came out, they weren't available to pre-order at all. Wow. You ordered on the day that it released, and that was the earliest you could do it, and it was just through A24's website. And then later on, it became available in other places. So it's kind of an odd approach to releasing books, and I know that it's not A24's primary thing. So just be aware, if that's something that you're interested in, it's not the traditional release kind of operation that other publishers would have. But
when you're when you're working with a company that is not strictly or even often a book publisher, really all bets are off. I mean, just look at everyone who bought the Eras Tour book, the Taylor Swift book that she sold through Target that was apparently rife with issues.
I do want to say about Tim, first of all, he is an amazing human being. I really adore him as a person. He is going to be a guest of honor at StokerCon in June. But also he is so good at novelizations. Like he takes them, because he takes them seriously and tries to bring readers more. They're so good. He does Star Wars ones. Like he does so many. It's impressive.
And it can't be an easy thing to take a story someone already told and make it your thing. But from what I got from X, he did a great job of that. But like just anybody go to his website and see all the stuff he's written. It's intimidating. Intimidating.
Another dad joke.
Another dad joke.
I got
a
million.
You're doing great.
I love it.
All right.
Okay, so my first for May is Below the Grand Hotel by Kat Scully. I realize I have been maddeningly inconsistent about saying the pub dates and publishers, but this one is May 6th from Clash. Excuse me. The kind of log line for this one is The Great Gatsby meets Hellraiser. Set in the 1920s in New York. It's about a woman who will do anything to become a Ziegfeld girl. She really wants to be famous. And she's kind of making her way through the world by picking pockets. And when she picks the wrong pocket, she ends up paying the price of her soul to a hotel run by demons, which that just also kind of reminds me of like the Assassin Hotel in John Wick, which I love that conceit. So at this hotel, she performs every night at the, crowded theater. But, and this is her dream, right? But of course, losing your soul is not the ideal price to pay for that. And so she has to try and steal her soul back before she ends up as a demon forever. And Kat is also a wonderful artist, and she has done illustrations for this book as well. So it's really going to be a beautiful, like, full package.
So I totally wanted to talk about this book as well. You stole 2 books I want to talk about, but I found 2 more. So my first one is by an author I really, really like. It's Caitlin Starling, and it is The Starving Saints. And what I like about Caitlin is all her books are very different. But when I've read all of them, you see this uniting of the way she writes. That's really interesting. So I'm super excited to read this one. So this one is set in a castle that's been under siege for 6 months. Food is running low and there's been no sign of rescue. But just as their survivors consider deliberately thinning their numbers, the castle stores are replenished. The sick are healed. And the divine figures of the Constant Lady and her saints have arrived, despite the barricaded gates offering, anything they need in return for their adoration. It reminds me a little of the unworthy Emily when I hear about this, right? So soon the entire castle is under the sway of their saviors, right? They have feasts that are slightly terrible. In origin, the war hero gives his allegiance to the Constant Lady. There's a sorceress, there's races to unravel the mystery of the new visitors. And it's just, the castle descends into just bacchanalian madness. And they do forget that there is a masked army beyond the walls. So there are 3 women, and they're the only ones that can see the situation for what it's worth. And they're going to try to save the castle. It's just sounds fascinating and bonkers at the same time, but also really looking into relationships between people and what happens when you're in a bad situation and the people save you and how you deal with it. I really see a lot of ties to real life horrors and how we deal with them. So I'm excited to read this one. And like I said, she always puts in things that just make you think about everything you thought you knew in a different way. Her last book, The Last to Leave the Room, did that for me. It was a little more science fiction-y. But that one stayed in my head 4 weeks, and I still am thinking about the Luminous Dead. I can't even
I love
tell
Luminous
you.
Dead.
I can't even tell you how much I still think about that book on a regular basis.
My cat wants
and again,
to.
that one's in space, right?
Oh my
Your
God.
cat wants
Always
to be
happy for a cat appearance.
This is Ziggy. He's very special. You cannot chew on the microphone, buddy. My sweetheart. God,
I was re-listening to our second episode for 2024, and Ziggy makes an appearance. And you had disclaimed that if you did not pick up Ziggy, there would just be lots of noise, a lot of a cacophony because of it.
Oh yeah. No, I mean that's his whole mode. He's just got to be right here. Becky, we easily could have switched because I'm also a huge fan of Caitlin's books, and I'm so excited about this book. She has been referring to it obliquely on social media for a couple years now as the Fucky Bees book.
I cannot wait.
I think she is wonderful. I always have a blast reading her. So
she also told me she might come all the way across the country to StokerCon.
Ooh, I would love that.
Fingers crossed. I know.
I'm sad that I will not be going to StokerCon. All right, I'm going to end up my May with The Nightbirds by Christopher Golden. So I've read some Christopher Golden over the years, and I've always liked what he's doing. And this one just sounds interesting. So I don't know if either of you have read this. I have not, and so I'm just going off of what I'm reading about it. But the general idea
I have it right here.
And the cover.
My review is due February 4th.
It's such a good cover.
That cover is gorgeous. It's gorgeous. The idea is the protagonist works for the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, and he's living on this kind of half-sunken freighter, off the coast of Texas. And there's like a storm that's, kind of coming up, and he's going to kind of weather it. He's going to ride it out on this freighter that he lives on. And then a woman from his past shows up with, who they've got obviously it's that kind of, they've got history. And she shows up with a baby asking to stay with him so that she can be safe from, people who are after the baby, who turns out to be a coven of witches, I believe. And so it's this people from my past, and we're on this weird half sunken freighter, which has a forest of mangrove trees. And there's a storm, and there's these witches and everything. So it just sounds like, first of all, a beautiful setting. The story sounds like it's promising, and from what I've read of Christopher stuff in the past, he's got the chops to make it a really good book. So yeah, it sounded pretty interesting. And that cover,
he has a real brilliance for hooks, I think.
Yeah.
So my second pick for May is Overgrowth by Mira Grant. And for those who don't know, Mira Grant is a pen name that Shannon McGuire uses primarily when she writes thriller and horror. And Shannon McGuire is just one of the most virtuosically prolific authors in the sci-fi, fantasy, and horror space. Multiple books a year for multiple years running, jumping between genres, jumping between multiple long-running series. There's, Encrypted and October Day, and the the Portal Fantasy series of Tor.com that I'm blanking on the name of.
Oh, with the fairy tales. Yeah. They're the people that go into fairy tales and come back.
Yeah. And her horror books from some years ago, I really loved Into the Drowning Deep and Rolling in the Deep, which were just fantastic mermaid horror stories. There's not enough mermaid horror out there. And this one is plant horror, and that's another real catnip subject for me. The logline on this one is Invasion of the Body Snatchers meets Day of the Triffids. Can't wait. And there's not a lot of information in the copy for the book. It's about a young girl who has been telling everyone since she was old enough to talk that she's not a human, she's an alien. And everyone's like, yeah, okay, whatever. Nobody believes her. Now, all of a sudden, there is an alien signal. Something is coming to Earth, and they are coming for her. And that's really all that we're getting from the copy for this book. And I'm like, yeah, that's all I need.
I have a book to talk about for May that doesn't need much talking about as well either. Um, it is The Butcher's Daughter, the hitherto untold story of Mrs. Lovett. And yes, that's Mrs. Lovett from Sweeney Todd. It's by David Demchuk, whose name you probably know. He's a Canadian horror author, but it also has a co-author who I believe this is her first book. Her name is Corinne Lee Clark. So it's based on the untold story of Mrs. Lovett from Sweeney Todd. Those of you who don't know what Sweeney Todd is, basically, Sweeney Todd was during Victorian times. He had clients. He was a barber, and he would kill them. And then Mrs. Lovett would make them into pies, and they had a business deal together. And it's a famous opera.
The Demon
So it's
Barber of
set in
Fleet
London,
Street.
England in 1880. Yes, the Barber of Fleet Street. London, England in 1887. So it's got all of those great Penny Dreadful vibes and Jack the Ripper vibes, like all that. I love that. I am a sucker for a Victorian, dirty streets, dark corners, horrible people. So we're at the abandoned apartment of missing young woman. There's evidence being collected. The chief inspector is there. It's all the stuff I love. And they're looking into all of it, right? It's just, I don't want to share too much about it. And I haven't read it yet, but I'm reading it soon. So I'm also not trying to share too much for myself. But it's an epistolatory journey also. And somebody, was it Rob? One of you mentioned you like epistolatory novels. It's also inventive. And it's also this idea of, obviously unraveling the true story behind Mrs. Lovett and giving her more heft, the heft she doesn't have in the opera. But also, it does look at this whole idea that we're on the edge of the modern world, right? That Victorian time, the turn of the 20th century. It does a lot with that as well. So I'm very excited for this one.
That sounds awesome.
Hey, look, we made it to June.
Made it to June. We're in the home stretch. I'm going to start June by talking about this is a ghoulish book, and it's called The Small Hours by Bob Pastorella. Bob Pastorella I met in like 2011, and one of the most memorable things from like my first conversation with him was he said in his Texas accent, "It's all horror." And like his whole idea was like horror is in everything. And at the time I was like, oh, that's cute, haha, that's a Bob thing. But like over the years, like that has become more and more true and become more and more like poignant for me. And so I always love coming back to like one of the first things that dude said to me was it's all horror. So The Small Hours it's got a very brief description you can find on the website, the Ghoulish website. Convinced the man next door is a serial killer, Jay and his friends break in to the alleged murderer's shed for evidence and instead discover a bloodthirsty nightmare. Sounds good to me. So yeah, definitely love Bob. If anybody's not aware, Bob is a co-host of the long-running horror podcast, This Is Horror. And he's co-authored stuff with Michael David Wilson, his co-host, and he's been grinding in horror for a very long time, and I'm looking forward to a new standalone work from Bob.
All right, so my first for June is coming out June 17th from Putnam, Ecstasy by Ivy Pacoda. Ivy Pacoda, it's her first like full venture into horror. I read her first novel, Visitation Street, when I was working at HarperCollins when it came out, and I just loved it. I was living in Brooklyn at the time. It was set in Red Hook, and it was just this kind of wonderful portrait of a neighborhood with a little bit of a ghost element in there too. And now she has stepped, I think this is her fourth novel, stepped fully into horror with this. It is about a wealthy woman whose controlling, nasty husband has just died, and she's in Greece for the opening of her son's, luxury villa or something. And her son is also horrible and controlling and just dismal. And she's just not happy with her life. She feels very constrained. She doesn't feel like herself. And she finds herself really drawn to these women living in tents on the beach near the resort. and they dance at night around the fire and they play drums. And it turns out they have a line to an ancient god who lives on this island who promises to fulfill all their dark wishes. And I love that setup. This is a short novel. I think it's just over 200 pages. I talked a little bit on that Talking Scared year-end wrap-up with Anna about how we're both a little bit tired of like good for her female rage novels. Not because we don't like them, but because we're sort of tired of them having a reason to exist. This is absolutely an exception for me. Ivy is an incredibly talented writer. I love this hook. I love this setting. I really want to go to Greece. So there's that element. I was a Greek mythology girl as a kid. I'm sure you're shocked. So yes, I'm very excited. And this one also has a killer cover.
That sounds fun. I'm going to do something completely different. And it's a book I'm really excited about from Undertaker Books. So it's a small press. So it's by Patrick Barb and it is called The Nut House. But it's not just The Nut House. This is what's great about it. It's actually it's going to be two things. It's The Nut House. It's going to be published in June with an accompanying novelette prequel, The Acorn Run. And it's going to have interior illustrations by J.C. Amberlin. So The Nut House was first serialized in Cosmic Horror Monthly, where readers first got to meet Asher Black, who is a squirrel, and his bushy-tailed crew. That's right. He's a squirrel. It's squirrel horror. It's really, really going to be fun. So he's the sole surviving black squirrel in the majestic forest neighborhood, who's one of the best acorn thieves in town. And he's compelled by a leader of the gray squirrels they control the oak tree in the park, and he wants to lead a group of their hench squirrels, right, to an old house reputed to contain a vast stash of acorns that Gray's ancestors left in the attic. However, they find that the owner was a hoarder with towering piles of newspapers and puddles of sewage that they must negotiate to reach it. There's other animal inhabitants. There's going to be a Spanish translation. Like, they are going all out. This is weird and dark. And then they meet people that like worship a death god and they start picking off his crew. I'm just so excited. I want squirrel horror so bad after reading this description. I'm sad it was missing in my life.
When I added this one to the 2025 new releases list, I was just laughing. I was like, yeah, sure, man. Absolutely. Let's do it. Get weird with it.
Oh, I love it. That's fantastic.
Sometimes you need that kind of book, right? Like you
absolutely do
to go nuts a little bit, right?
Nuts. I see what you did.
Thanks. I can do the dad jokes too.
Dad joke number 3.
All right, we're on the last batch here. Oh my goodness.
Speed demons tonight.
I'm rounding out. Yeah, I know. I'm rounding out June with which people might call me out on this not necessarily being horror, but it's S.A. Cosby, and I don't give a damn. So King of Ashes comes out June of 2025, and I don't know if either of you have read it yet. I have not. But the story is basically protagonist is called back home after his father is in a car accident, only to discover that a sibling has gotten himself into some trouble with some, unsavory characters. And so it's the story of like, how does this guy get his family out of the trouble that they're in, things from their past resurface. And the thing that I didn't realize until I was like preparing earlier today is that his father is in charge of Carruthers crematorium. And I was like, this book is called The King of Ashes, and it's got a crematorium in it. And I was just so charmed by the fact that like, that the title seems to be, tying directly into that. But here's what I'm going to say. S.A. Cosby can do no wrong in my eyes. I've read everything but All the Sinners Bleed. And the dude is just top of his game, and people aren't doing crime the way that he's doing crime. And he's an incredible writer and a great dude. If anybody wants to hear a good conversation, back when I was doing podcasts for Lit Reactor, I had a conversation with him and Rob Hart, which was very good. And you can find that on the ARC party. If you go back, there's a episode with S.A. Cosby, but the dude is an incredible writer and just so impressive. And there's so much just like, he's one of those people where like you're reading his story and you're feeling the struggles and the challenge, but also the love and the pride. And like, you feel such humanity in the stuff that he writes. And so like, dude can do no wrong in my eyes. So excited whenever he's got something new coming out. So King of Ashes, absolutely one of the things I'm looking forward to.
All right. My last book for this installation, and I apologize because I believe this just recently, the pub date moved. It was a June book. It's now a July book. Coming out July 15th from Nightfire. This is Girl in the Creek by Wendy Wagner, the wonderful Wendy Wagner. I read The Deer Kings a couple years ago, one of her previous novels, and she does like Pacific Northwest, like small town Gothic so well. She's really tapped into the atmosphere and the nature and the way it feels. And so I'm really excited by the pitch of this book, which is about a woman living in the Pacific Northwest whose brother disappeared into the woods 5 years before. A lot of hikers go missing around there. They're all unsolved cases. And when she finds the corpse of a local woman in a creek, she stumbles into this sort of cosmic eco-horror climate change plot that has wide-ranging implications. And I'm absolutely here for fungal horror. I'm here for eco horror. I love a missing hiker story. I mean, I was talking about the search and rescue officer, like creepypasta stories earlier. I've also read multiple nonfiction books about people who go missing on in national parks and things like that. So yeah, this is absolute bait for me. I can't wait.
That sounds great. It's on my review list for Library Journal, so I'm excited. It was supposed to be it's been pushed a few times, so I'm excited to finally get to read it. All right, so I guess I'm last. I picked a book, and it's totally because I just was in Barcelona, so it is set in Catalonia, so I was very much drawn to this. It's called I Gave You Eyes and You Looked Toward Darkness by Irene Sola. And it is from Grey Wolf Press, which is a press I really, really like. So it's set on, and it's funny because I was seeing it was, it's set in a rugged mountain range in Catalonia that's frequented by wolf hunters, people who are deserting things, race car drivers, ghosts, and demons. And I just met some people when I was in Barcelona who were like hiking in the mountains. So it was very interesting connection for me. So we're in a remote farmhouse called Mas Clavel, and there's an impossibly old woman who lies on her deathbed. And this is one of those stories that's like stories within stories. Mm-hmm. Families and caretakers drift in and out. Meanwhile, all the women who have lived and died in that house are waiting for her to join them, as you do, right? They're preparing to throw her a party. And then as day turns to night, 400 years worth of stories unspool, and the house is just filled with raucous laughter, pungent feasts, piercing cries of pleasure and pain. And it all begins with the matriarch Joanna from the house, who once longed for a husband, and perhaps even an heir with a patch of land and a roof over his head. She summoned the devil to fulfill her wish, struck a deal, and a man in exchange for her soul. So when, on her wedding day, Joanna discovers that her husband was missing a toe, which was eaten by wolves, she exploited a loophole in her agreement, heedless of what consequences might follow. So it's this novel that just has the lines between living and dead, past and present they just merge. And it draws on the oral traditions and fairy tales, and it's just a new kind of story. And I love stories within stories. I'm going to be excited about the setting. I love this blurring of the living and dead and this idea that your ancestors are right there with you. I'm just super excited about it.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah. And there we are. We made it to June.
I would ask you guys to indulge me in something really quick. This won't take very long, but I was just trying to think of how the variety of kind of like types of horror we talked about were really all over the place. And so like thinking of kind of just listing out some of the types, because obviously we got a werewolf in there. We've got vampires, historical horror. We've got jump in whenever you want to say something, but
nun horror, hotel
nuns,
horror,
witches, grief.
Lots
There's
of
grief in there.
Squirrels.
There's that cosmic horror, squirrel horror.
I've got a few contemporary entries in there, sort of dealing with our issues, you know.
Yeah.
There's some kind of Truman Show kind of action in there. We got
really,
some
basically anything you want to read about. There's a horror novel for it.
Right. Like, and this is just the first half of the year. So I love that we're not, I love, first of all, I love the fact that, like, you know, we all can choose different stuff that we're excited about. Cause like, yes, of course I'm excited about the Wendig book. And of course I'm excited about the Nat Cassidy book, but there's so much out there that it's not hard for us to find other stuff when we're battling for those, you know, like those ones we're really excited about. But that there's such a variety, there's such a, but like, there's something for everybody, kind of a feel to not our list, but the stuff that's out there, because there's so much stuff we didn't even talk about.
Yeah, there are over 300 books on the new releases list already for next year, and like a lot of the books from the fourth quarter are not even, you know, available to the public yet.
Right. Yeah. And so it's just so encouraging.
Year. We were all excited last year, and there's even more. It was not hard to find books to talk about, even when like I went on the list and Emily had grabbed some. It wasn't like it was hard for me to find more.
This year, 2024, exactly. The new releases list, I think we topped out at like 500 plus titles, which is incredible. So 300 in 2025 so far, but again, we don't have like a full, you know, I'll be adding stuff throughout the rest of, you know, the coming year.
Yeah. And so that'll just be a nice way to kind of button things up. Emily's list, as anybody who pays a lot of attention to horror will tell you, is an absolute necessity. It is the Bible for a lot of people as far as like what's coming out. If you use the list, also know that you can make suggestions to contribute to the list. So if you're aware of a small press or just something that got announced late or whatever it is, there is a form that you can fill out. And I was listening to our last conversation. Use the search function first and see if you just, you know, you didn't notice it, but it's on there. But if you use the search function and you find that the title that you're thinking of isn't on there, use the form to suggest that it be added to the list. Because it's an incredible list, but one person can't know everything. And so the fact
I'm trying
can make suggestions to improve it. I know. But it is a Herculean effort. I have to imagine
it's a lot of work. But
just accessing your list and planning off of it is a lot of work. So you making the list has to be like such bigger than that. And then Becky, I feel like you're always living in the future more than even me, who, like, you know, this is my whole thing, is like trying to know about and read stuff before it comes out. So
so we'll be talking about it. We'll be talking about my book next year. It comes out January 2026. Okay. And yes, it's called Why I Love Horror, but we'll talk about it in the future. We'll be talking about it at StokerCon. There'll be arcs. I did get confirmation there'll be arcs.
That's great.
And there's going to be a lot of it. If for those of you who are librarians who listen, there's going to be a lot at ALA. I'm going to be on a panel about the for library reads, and we're going to be talking about it in a bunch of places all over Philadelphia in late June. I'll be spending my 50th birthday partying at ALA, apparently. Not what I foresaw when I, looked forward to my 50th birthday, but I will be spending the fall promoting it as well. So it's very exciting. Everything's coming together, and yeah, I have everything. It's about ready to be sent to be made into arcs. So, but I did want to take a moment to also congratulate Emily on all the success she had this year with her book, Horror for Weenies. Yep. The day it showed up on the Books We Love of NPR, I like squealed and texted her. Yeah. I was so excited for her. I have bought multiple copies for people in my life who are like, this is the book I needed to be able to talk to you. including my sister-in-law, which I literally just had it pre-ordered and delivered to her without her knowing. And her first comment was, "I think this is from you, and why am I on the cover?" It was just perfect.
That's fantastic.
And she especially loved the Hereditary chapter where you straight up say, "This may be too scary to read," and she's like, "Yep, I'm not reading that one." But she went to the back to the to like the cocktail party questions. But anyway, it's a great book. I loved it so much. I gave it a star in Library Journal, but it's everything it claims to be and so much more. Even if you love horror movies, you need to read this because the stuff about, first of all, the synopsis reminded me from older books. There it is, right? I can see it over my shoulder. Also, like the why this movie is important. There it is. We sometimes forget why these movies are important, right?
Yeah.
And then the cocktail party talk, that actually is helpful to me to not scare people too much. Like I could bring up maybe not Hereditary, but some of the other movies. So anyway, congratulations, Emily. It's great, and it's going to have a long tail of people. You can still go buy it. Buy it for all your friends who are weenies.
Thank you so much, Becky. Thank you. It's been a crazy few months.
Yeah, I know you've been everywhere. I'm sort of not looking forward to that.
It's exhausting. Take your vitamin C because you will get worn out.
Yeah. And they've already told me they want me to travel in the fall to promote it, and then again when it comes out.
Great.
So we'll see.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I'm very happy for both of you. This is wonderful. Okay, so for anybody who's listening, this is something that we do every 6 months because this is going to be almost 2 hours of conversation for just 6 months. So there's no way we could do a whole year. And then also for the reason that Emily mentioned earlier, a lot of the books that are coming out in the second half of the year really aren't kind of like solidified yet. So 6 months from now, we're going to come back and we're going to talk about the second half of 2025. In the meantime, we have a ton of an amazing reading to do. I recommend that anybody who wants to know what's coming in horror needs to make Emily and Becky's social medias part of your regular consumption because no one knows better than they do. And I am always blessed that you guys give me your time to share your knowledge on these episodes, and I really appreciate it. So thanks so much for taking your time, and I'm so excited about 6 months from now. I'm already thinking about the titles that I want to talk about, so I hope that you guys are excited about that as well.
Oh, definitely. Thank you so much, Rob. This is always a great time.
Yeah, it's super fun. Thanks.